Good morning, everyone, and now we're going to be talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and Mike Pondsmith, in the topic of games and politics, or politics and games, where it's usually associated with something a game shouldn't be doing. In this case, it's inherent in the actual design of the setting. And it's a beautiful thing to see that we can actually get real political issues, not necessarily discussions, but issues being addressed in a game. Now, we're talking about Cyberpunk, and Mike Pondsmith, we're talking about his vision of the future, at least in his pen and paper game, Cyberpunk 2020, which had to do with the collapse of the American economy, state, I guess you can say, and how it's being supported by all kinds of corporations. So they has 24 corporations here, and the world of Night City is essentially free to do what it likes. So when you have a not a laissez-faire, but it's sort of this no rule world where technology and economics come together, you're going to have a lot of people striving for power, and every day is going to be different. You're going to get all these people you cross on the street. One guy could have an arm cannon like a Mega Man, and then you turn a corner. The other guy could be a puppet of some sort, depending on what stage of technology Cyberpunk 2020 is in. But because you call a game or a product or a story cyberpunk, that is a subgenre. So you're talking specifically about technology, cybernetics, computers, any sorts of biological things that could be done to the body. Who knows exactly what's going to be happening? I'm not familiar with the lore as much as I should be. But Mike Pondsmith has been involved with the game throughout the entire experience. So that's good to know that development is going smoothly and that everything is political. A big part of what Cyberpunk talks about is its disparities of power and how technology readdresses that. Again, standard science fiction concept. How does technology influence man? And because we're dealing with a subgenre of science fiction, it's going to be very specific kinds of technology. Cyberpunk is deeply political subgenre. Yes, it's no surprise there'll be two. Pretty much what I just talked about. I tell people that Cyberpunk is a warning, not, hey, this is going to be great. Okay, that's true. A lot of these Cyberpunk style stories are sometimes warnings, and sometimes these alien worlds we can't quite understand, like diving into the net, or having a series of people who are cyborgs, or a series of AI who have their own existence outside of just being on a hard drive. We are getting technologies now that are outstanding, things that I thought would be way out of our reach before 2020. So even though he made the game for 2020, he wrote the game in the 80s, I believe, he's still being astounded by what we have. Obviously, we're not at the level of Cyberpunk 2020 next year, but that's fine. You don't have to be some sort of prognosticator of what's going to be happening in the future with technology. So if we have that, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to make the world work? How are we going to make sure that the right people use that technology responsibly? That could be referring to many kinds of technology. Technology as a service, like going to the doctor. What would you pay? What kind of doctor is it? Is it going to be a medical doctor? Is it going to be a cybernetic doctor? It's going to be a mix of both. What are the standards for that? Do we really want corporations structuring how our lives work? Well, we already have that now. The argument is that they do it completely, or they have free reign to do whatever. And that's where the discussion comes in. That's the real political discussion. How does technology influence our lives? That should really be the most important discussion for humans when we strip away all the archaic forms of politics. Right now, we have corporations that follow us everywhere. That's a huge issue. It always will be. It's important for us to think where we're going with this capability. Cyberpunk is inherently political, but not in the commonly considered sense of left and right, or conservative and liberal. And this is really what I wanted to address in this post, that when we're talking about politics, we generally think of politics of our time, or what's happening now with our statesmen, our congressmen, our senators, our representatives. Whereas really, when you're talking about politics, what you're referring to are how individuals or people or groups of people are trying to control other groups of people or other individuals. That's what politics is. It's really a synonym for control or power. Who has the power? So when you have the elimination, at least by the setting, as far as I understand it, that it's no longer the traditional political leviathan. It is the control of corporations and how they are influencing your life. So everything is political. Human beings are political. First we got food, then we got prostitution, and then we got politics. We might have gotten politics before prostitution, but I'm not sure. Basically, it's all political, but a big part of what Cyberpunk talks about is the disparities of power and how technology readdresses that. And that's a bit too generic or general for me. I'd like to know exactly what kind of power he's referring to. And of course, we can certainly read up on the books and play some of the Cyberpunk 2020 scenarios if we want to know more. But I'm sure we can understand that there's more than just people who want power and control. There has to be some technology, there has to be some virus, some new fad, and how that translates to the game world, I'm not sure. That's why I want more information. He's talking about his Talsorian Games company. And now he's talking about levelers, which is an interesting way of describing how people with ideas can bring them to market. So technology has created levelers. YouTube is a leveler in many ways because I don't have to go to some network to get a TV show made. That's right. You can go get some people together who have skills and talents in video production, audio, lighting, and you can make your own show. If you wanted to, you can do so. Flash was a leveler. Now, by Flash, not the superhero Flash, but Shockwave Flash or Adobe Flash. You can animate stuff. You could throw this app into a website, and you can make it a game. You can make it an animation. You can do all kinds of interactive things. You don't have to go somewhere to get a toy license to get an animation made. Suddenly, I can do radical, interesting, and heavily political things because technology is my enabler. So right now, he's just talking about media. And that you as an individual, if you have the time and passion, can go ahead, make some video, and stick it on YouTube. Same thing with gaming, same thing with animation. You can use Flash if you like. And that's the general idea I get from him in regards to technology. Not necessarily Cyberpunk, but technology as a whole. So he now views Cyberpunk as similar to the Star Wars trilogy. This is interesting. The first one, I would hope, okay? Or the different generations of Star Trek. Okay. He was referring to the game's world's capacity for new, original stories, but his description of its evolution also illustrates its built-in political elements. I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at there. 2013 was about a world that was recovering and learning to use new technology. 2020 was a world in which corporations were supreme and abused that power tremendously. The new book we're doing at Talsorian, Cyberpunk is about how people recover from that screw-up, take the wheel for themselves, and redirect where they're going to go. Okay, so it sounds as if the next story in the Cyberpunk series he's writing is either after a fall of the corporations or how the individual people see what the corporations are doing and then take that technology and use it for themselves. That is interesting because we don't really talk too much about, at least in science fiction that I'm familiar with, where we're either going way, way into the future, or we're talking about modern times like Cyberpunk, where we have this futuristic world that some elite few or groups like corporations are taking over technology and doing something new with them. We never really talk about how the individual then take that technology and do something else, or after the fact. Like maybe a Fallout series where there's a nuclear winter and we're in this post-apocalyptic world of technology and radiation. Sometimes those stories pop up, but they never really talk about how, if after the fall of an economic power, in this case corporations that control technology, how would that then create a society? What would those people do? Like imagine a certain special type of gun, or now that humanity has the ability to read minds or communicate thoughts to digital information quickly. Stuff like that. That's not really something that is looked upon too much in settings. Surely technology in regards to telepathy or thoughts to other forms of communication, that happens quite a lot. You have Star Trek with people who are telepathic and what have you, but never the individual. So I've never seen an entire story made about that. And I don't know how that translates. So it's always great to see new technology or new ideas present in science fiction, and that's why the genre is so interesting to most people. So a lot of 2077 is about that push between people who want to gain power from the corporations and their groups and the people who have had a taste of their own freedom and are not going to go along with this. So right now, Telsorian is running the Empire Strikes Back. Okay, the black sheep of the Cyberpunk series, I guess. While 2077 is essentially Return of the Jedi, or beyond even. Okay, so I don't know how that works with the linearity of the Star Wars franchise in relation to Cyberpunk Red, but this is all good stuff. These are the kinds of posts I want to hear about in regards to politics in video games, because this is inherently the point of the setting. This setting of Cyberpunk, not necessarily the gameplay, not necessarily storyline, but the setting. And so that if they want to do stuff that could be translated to today, they could, but it's not necessary because they're telling their own story. They have their own focus. They have their own setting that they want to work with. And that's the beauty of having video games with science fiction, with futuristic settings, and not having to have some bizarre, nonsensical, meaningless conversation about gender dysphoria or identity politics. It's all about the game. It's all about the setting. And when you have the creator of that setting working on your game, you know you're going to have something awesome.